On today's podcast, we have Saalim Chowdhury, who is an angel investor and former managing director of Techstars London. So Saalim, thank you so much for joining us on the Reindustrialized Podcast. We're really excited to have you here and to have an opportunity to chat with you about your past experience within investing in this space. And I know that you are someone with a lot of strong beliefs about politics and about the role of government in these topics. Yeah. It's cool. We'll get into it. And really excited to, have the opportunity for us to discuss this more. Before we started talking, you were giving me a point of British pride that you felt like was relevant for
I feel
the
it
podcast.
should be a point of British pride. So we're here in London, and last week was the week that we closed our last coal power station. So the birthplace of the industrialized era, where the first coal power station was, it was only literally a mile away in an underground tunnel from where we are today. And Britain has now closed its final coal-powered power plant. Now, one of the things that it really strikes me is this is, for me, very much the death of the old industrialization method and the birth of the new one. The problem is, nobody knows what this new world looks like.
And that is what we're going to get into today. As someone who's focused specifically on investing for the last, I don't know how many years,
9 years,
9 years, almost a decade now, seeing companies around the world. I know you've been in the US, you've been in Europe, you spent time in Asia, in the Middle East. What is your sort of take on what this possible new world is with respect to the new industries?
I mean, we've moved from the industrial era to now we went through the digital era, but in many ways that was just optimizing the industrial era. I think the joy of AI is that we're about to hit peak optimization, mathematical optimization, faster than you can shake a stick. And so within just a tiny blink, maybe 3 to 5 years, the most forward-thinking companies in the industrial world will have adopted the abilities that AI give them to be more efficient, from better supply chain, better understanding of supply risks, etc. No longer do you need an army of McKinsey consultants and a large SAP installation, right? The software, that's all there. And that's been building over the last 2 decades when I've been looking at software for the industrial manufacturers and the industrial world. So what happens when we hit peak optimization? I think we're going to get there in about 4 or 5 years if people are willing to bite the bullet and change. Correct. But the thing is that we're in an industrial world war.
With who?
Well, we have the industrial powerhouse of China, which is able to build and spit things out very quickly.
Amazingly quickly. As someone who lived in China, I am continuously impressed with how quickly things go.
Engineering is getting better, and everything is like, we only have to look towards the AI chips piece. They thought they couldn't do it. America's like, no, they couldn't possibly build a chip.
One of my favorite China stories is that 30 years ago, companies in China, could not build trains. They could not build trains. Yes. And now they have some of the most impressive train networks and train manufacturing in the world.
But we say that for China, but we forget that not just that there are plenty of other global powerhouses that are getting to that point. You look at the level of engineering capability in Latin America. You look at the fact that iPhones are being made in India, right? You're looking at the fact, even on the African continent, the long neglected, it's Africa, we can't do anything there. You look at the rise in manufacturing plants, you look at the rise in data centers, you look at the rise in technology companies and engineering as education has become more democratized, as the skills to understand how to build good industrial processes are so much more common and so commonly shared. I mean, look, we are in the international export hub of education here, right? We have some great universities here, but all we do is export it.
Yeah.
Right? And we don't do anything ourselves here. I mean, let's be quite frank and honest. No British person would buy a Jaguar Land Rover.
They're not known for being very reliable.
Or easy to keep on to. But moving swiftly on. Sorry, I should explain. It's Tata Jaguar Land Rover, obviously.
Yes.
And that's the whole... and the reason I say that is because it's the globalization piece. And this is the whole thing. It's like trying to treat it as, is Jaguar Land Rover a British company? Is it an Indian company? It's actually neither.
Yeah.
It's ultimately it's one of the reasons it's here in the UK is because the UK allows it to have a smorgasbord of talent, a smorgasbord of ideas. But that is in many ways why they may actually come out quite well in Industrialization 2.0.
Before we get too deep into this, I want to give the audience an opportunity to learn a little bit more about you. So can you tell us a little bit about your background? Because you are one of these fascinating entrepreneurs turned investors. No. I think it's worthwhile to applaud that because we need more of them in the investing space. I think people have actually gone through the trenches of building and know what it's like.
Particularly in Europe.
And
that includes the UK. In case there's some people on this podcast who think we're not part of Europe anymore. We are still in geographically, we're still Europe.
In Europe, we need more investors who have founder background. So tell us a little bit about your background prior to getting into the investing space. And then I'd be curious to talk a little bit about what kind of companies you have looked at within this industrial world and as part of your investing career.
Definitely. So short version is, like everybody, I'm very blessed. My parents were like, work hard, do well in school. And I ended up at Cambridge. And then what do you do after a fancy degree? You go work in consulting.
As one does.
And then you're a bit like, is this it? And then for me, it was very much like, okay, I know what I should go do. I'm going to go join a startup because they actually make stuff, and in reality, like actually making stuff was actually what really got me excited. And yes, we're making software. In both of my cases, B2B SaaS that optimize, human processes that were traditionally human done, be it in cybersecurity or be it in talent. And helping them make better decisions through machine learning. I feel like that could almost be the title of a preaching book: Better Decisions Through Machine Learning.
And
how to find the Tao of peace through machine learning. Anyway, I digress. Back to my story. Sorry. So that's what we went and built, and then at 500, this is where we met.
Correct.
So they backed my last startup, and I just nagged until I got a job with them.
And it worked because you became, in a lot of ways, the representative for 500 startups in Europe, the Middle East, and Asia, and parts of Asia at least.
Well, indeed. Yeah. And so that startup journey was amazing, going from nothing to seeing the company's exit, building the product. So I'm an engineer. You may realize my lack of social skills and inability to talk. So I'm a product engineer guy. But that background, what was really good about it is I've built stuff and I understand the joy of getting into people's hands and the pain of getting into people's hands. Yeah. And that totally informs my thesis as an investor because it has nothing, there are lots of very bright, capable people who could do things. The difference between could do and have done is huge.
Yeah, that gulf of doing is one that many founders never actually get over and that many people who want to found never even get to that point.
And what's really interesting is often you see the more privileged the background. And that privilege comes in many, many forms. It's not wealth, it's not just race, it's not just education. It's this element where people have believed, yeah, of course you can do it. Why not?
For sure.
There's a huge difference between actually doing it and thinking you can do it. And I think anybody who's actually particularly who's worked in the industrial sector is like, yeah, it's really easy in theory to think about how I'm going to build a factory, a machine, a supply chain, a source, etc. Do it, and then come back to me. There's a reason I have no hair.
And it's because you tried to build a company?
Yes, several times. And thankfully we got lucky in some parts and started others. But that's the experience that really makes me think as an investor, what makes a good founder? What makes things? Because ultimately we live in an era where the processes and the pathways of doing stuff are actually well trodden.
Yeah, nothing is, as they say, there's nothing new under the sun to parody a cliche.
AI takes the game level up dramatically. right? It takes the standard and the bar that everybody operates up really high.
For sure.
But ultimately, it reduces the friction to execute. So it should mean more people could build new things.
Does that mean that there's more stuff out there then? And more things to wade through? And if you're looking at it from an investor perspective?
And that's the difference between people who have executed versus people who think they can execute or have been told, they went to Veha, they are very capable, they are very thing. Their family comes from a long line of people who do this. But taking that first step, doing it yourself, and falling flat on your face, I will do that. I will back those founders 1,000 times more than I will the bright 22-year-old who's just come out of MIT and has just gone through Y Combinator and has done as much in their life as and actually executed and built stuff as I have, been on Strictly Come Dancing.
So to shift the conversation a little bit, I think it's interesting to talk a little bit about the work that you've done investing in founders who focus on these industrial topics. And we were talking a little bit about how we define industrialized topic for the podcast, Reindustrialized. And obviously we at Xpress Ventures come from a background of supply chain and logistics. So obviously that's in there. Thinking about construction and real estate, thinking about heavy industry, thinking about energy and decarbonization topics, and then thinking about sort of the role of enterprise SaaS and cybersecurity as sort of the backbone for any of the changes that are going to happen in this space. So as you look into your portfolio of companies that you've invested in at Techstars, that you've invested in at 500, that you've invested in as an angel investor, what are some of the companies or the ideas that you found within this industrial space to be the most promising and interesting, and where have you seen the most success from an investment perspective?
So almost always the success comes by looking the other way.
Okay,
so
tell me more.
Here's the thing. So one of my favorite up-and-coming companies is a company called Boxstocks. Okay. They are literally focusing on the wasted space in vans and in parcels. You've had that Amazon delivery where the thing that is about the same size as this coffee cup is in a box. Exactly. And so
with plastic and paper if they're good. If they're really being sustainable, there's paper, but it's probably plastic.
But even then, the CO2 and the emissions, and also the sheer human time. Like, human lives are precious, right? Like, the poor soul who's having to who would much, you want to do 50 deliveries if you're a driver. You don't want to do 10 deliveries of empty space. Waste your life. It's less value of your life, right? And then obviously there's efficiency, all this kind of stuff. So their whole idea was, right, let's change the nature of the box. Let's change it to a plastic box that adjusts in size. Mm-hmm. Let's actually have real-time analytics of what's in a van, in a box at any time. And so the idea is the items are packaged in the least amount of packaging possible. The crates that are used in the trucks are used more efficiently or made larger and smaller. So interesting, like pharmaceuticals are fascinating for this. Mm-hmm. They make these tiny little things.
Yes.
Yet the cost of shipping them, and all they're here, there, and everywhere, right? And the problem is often, particularly as we get into very urban cities, very highly dense cities, is the ability to get the traffic bandwidth and the space to get that item in time. Like, it's all about your efficiency of route.
Yeah.
So their whole premise is, if we fix the box and what's in the box at the right time, you can then fix everything else. So therefore, you spend less on packaging, less on delivery. They did their maths. DHL in London could possibly reduce their number of vans by 75%.
75%. That is quite a reduction.
But that's the thing. You get rid of the dead air. You have the right thing at the right place at the right time. Fundamentally, people who've been building factories, like we look at the Toyotas of the world, they're the ones who are famed for the just-in-time delivery, etc. A lot of it's applying these theses, but nobody's executed it in things because parcel delivery is so unglamorous.
As someone who works with a lot of parcel delivery companies with our parent company, it is a job that just has to be done. Right? It's essential work, as we called it in the
I wouldn't even call it has to be done. It's an amazing job. You are the thing that you make the magic happen. You are the thing. Somebody makes something somewhere, and you make the magic happen of actually helping that person, the company who's made something, but the person who wants it, actually get what they need. It's super essential.
Have you ever worked in a warehouse? Have you ever packed a box? Honestly. Have you ever been on a delivery path?
So
I say that as someone who has done it, and it's not to be facetious, but it is difficult. And I think that, there are a number of challenges that we look at.
That's the thing is I don't want to diminish the difficulty, but what I want to celebrate is it's actually a magical thing.
I agree.
Like the things I love, children are the best examples of this. Like when a child sees a delivery man or with a box. And so I think also it's easy for us to just see it. Oh, it's just delivery. Oh, it's just commonplace. Oh, they're doing something really magical. And actually, like when you look at the companies that have been, so there's a really fascinating organization in South Korea. Mm-hmm. And it's GS Shop.
Very familiar with GS Shop.
Perfect. So, and GS, one of the large conglomerates in Korea, very in the industrial space. But one thing that's really interesting is they have the same delivery person delivering the items that they bought off the TV home shopping channel. And what's happened is people end up building a relationship with that same delivery driver because it's consistent.
This harkens back to time olds where people had questions about the milkman or the delivery man in the U.S. with respect to the relationships with stay-at-home
what's going to
wives.
return in Industrialization 2.0? Human relationships.
That part, we are in complete agreement. That is going to be the priority.
And so this is the whole thing. The technology makes it all so efficient so delivery drivers don't have to just chuck things over the fence and run. Uh-huh. You can actually start building connections, which is what keeps humans together and actually keeps loyalty and continuity.
For sure.
And this, the whole thing is because the whole problem is industrialization for the last 5 decades has only been about speed, price, speed and price. Yeah. Speed, price. Quality has kind of been there, but if anything, quality is declining.
Yeah, I would say that it's a secondary measure or a tool that's being optimized for.
Totally. It's like,
and people are now, and there's another one I throw in there as well, which would be sort of decarbonization or environmental impact that's slowly slipping in the last 10 years. But you're right. Over the last 5 decades, overwhelmingly, it's about speed and how that relates to cost.
And funny story. I recently, my father recently gave me his 1996 Mercedes S-Class.
Okay. I guess, is that vintage yet or no? Not
Some
quite.
people would consider it vintage. So the UK threshold is 40.
Okay.
But at nearly 30 years, many people would consider it to be a classic.
Okay.
But this is the whole thing. That car drives smoother than anything. I drive an electric BMW. That Mercedes is better built, smoother, and more comfortable.
Is this planned obsolescence? Is that what you're talking about?
No, I think it's this whole idea of we forgot about quality.
Okay.
We forgot about quality that lasts. I cannot believe the electric BMW I drive will have anywhere near the longevity of that Mercedes. And this is the whole thing. It's like we talk about decarbonization, but the hard path of decarbonization is all through better life utility.
Yeah.
And this is the other thing in industrialization, which we keep forgetting, which is that the greatest thing about this era, and if you look at the most successful industrial companies, they've always looked beyond the traditional 2-3 year window. Yeah. Right. The ones that last. Right.
Yeah. They're looking for 100 years.
Yes. And so, but this is the whole thing. It's like, this is the other thing that's really exciting from an investment point of view, is if we can get things that should have better long expectancy, it creates a whole new business model that we've completely forgot about.
Which is the service.
Correct.
And this goes back to your point specifically about how relationships are important. And so if we make service the main point of the business model, then the human relationships become even more important.
And we end up with actually more profitable businesses, more efficient businesses. We end up with goods that actually you don't have to keep making stuff with planned obsolescence. You don't have to keep making stuff because there is no pride in that. Yeah. And this is the other thing, we are coming to a new era where people actually really want pride in what they do.
For sure.
And it's what ironically people had in, the 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, or so they say. I mean, my father certainly tells me this ad nauseum.
And my mom as well, who worked in the post office for many years. She really was proud of her work.
And that's the whole thing. That is a essential, vital service that really made sure that the rest of the society functioned. And so, yeah, we forget about this all the time. But this is one of the many joys of the 2.0 era, when everything hits, the standards raise and universal standards are high, no matter where you are in the world. The whole perceived perception of, yes, but we made it here, oh, we have that advantage, it's narrowing very, very, very fast.
Okay. I want to shift the topic a little bit to sort of think about how founders within this industrial space can be successful. Obviously, the framework and the way in which we have to build these companies is different. Oftentimes, there's governmental regulations that impact the uptake of a particular type of product, or there's oftentimes the incumbents who have to be the people who want to actually purchase these products or engage with these products in a way.
But change, what's change?
And change is difficult for these companies because they've worked well for the 40, 50, 100 years that they've been doing business the way they've wanted to.
If it was white break, and it's scary.
Yeah.
It's really freaking scary.
Humans don't like change, and I think big organizations like change even less.
I mean, I'll be the first to admit, look, I am an engineer. I'm technical. I was reluctant to play around with the generative AI models. I was like, oh, they won't be any good. Oh, they won't be this. It's like, it took me, somebody had to push me.
And what are you using? I'm just curious.
Claude mostly.
Claude. Do you find it to be better than ChatGPT or
Yes.
Mistral?
I mean, look, at the end of the day, the whole problem is we're not running comparative analysis on all of them with every query.
That's fair.
So the reality is, for me, right now, it's very much use the tool that helps, use a tool that you feel comfortable with. And then over time, the reality is they'll all blend into one anyway.
That's very true. We'll live in a multi-model world. But we digress.
Living in a multi-model I am a GPT user. Woo.
Okay, we'll definitely use that for the for the promo for this. Thank you for our first promo snippet. So to go back to founders.
Yeah.
What do we need to do to enable them to be successful in this space?
Okay, first and foremost, we've got to recognize that they are trying to build something, and 9 out of 10 times the people who are trying to build look different to the people we would normally hire in our industrial world. So
speak more on that. What does that mean?
So the thing is that often the biggest mistake from having been on the I have a shameful secret.
Speak to the camera, please.
I used to work at a large corporate for a few years.
Get him off the show immediately.
And the problem is like, when they're looking at other innovators, etc., and trying to sell it in through the board, the whole problem is the board are ultimately they're looking for their own definition of good. The people who are doing the most innovative stuff are actually at the intersection of multiple disciplines. This has long been the case. So the problem is they won't look, sound, or smell like somebody you'd hire. And in many ways, I would say that's the sign you probably want to work with them. So people go on and on about diversity and inclusion. For me, that is what diversity actually means. And it often is then represented in the people in the background, but we can go into that in a separate piece.
Yeah.
But so one of my favorite startups that I've backed is a company called Nothing. Carl Pei, he's the founder. He's based here in London.
You want to hold it up so people can see it?
So this is one example of his products, Nothing. And these are the earphones. But what they're trying to do is reinvent what it means to have physical products.
Yeah.
And if you look at these, they're beautiful. They're lightweight. Oops. And they're easy to fall down a couch.
Yeah, no, they are really beautiful.
But my point being is that like they've tried to create something that people can be proud of, that people enjoy playing with. Yeah. And this, the whole thing is, it's like, for me, this represents the future of industrialization.
And the case is beautiful too. Oh, wow, look at this. Yeah.
And it charges. And that's the whole thing. It's a talking point. It's a piece. It's not a white little box with two little white prods or a pair of black bows kind of, or look at this. It's like, the point being is, they're things that you can fall in love with. And this is why, Nothing, I firmly believe in 20 years will be amongst the standard electronic brands that we look at. Uh-huh. However, they'll be bringing, it's like, this is what industrialization is about. It's about joy. It's about, it's like, how do you put things into people's hands that they love and really want and will tell stories about?
And I'm sure they're not just like focused on the joy that we get, but they're probably also thinking, how do we do this from a different perspective in the back end, the supply chain? How do we make sure that we're being as sustainable? How are we building things that I'm guessing, given what you just talked about, last for a long time, that have longevity?
Without shadow of a doubt. And this thing, like if you look at their manufacturing approaches, it's not one country, it's multi-country. If you look at they know their audiences want eco-sustainable stuff. They have to put those creds up.
No cobalt from the Congo here, no?
I hope not. I sincerely hope not. And fingers crossed we're going to it. We're finally getting out of that time zone as engineering is getting better. But yeah, it's just, this is what the future looks like. The future looks, and the problem is, you look at Carl, and you go take him in front of any old school European electronics manufacturing thing.
What are they? They're like, who is this guy?
Yeah, he was born in Sweden, shock horror, Carl Pei. The name is obvious, of Chinese heritage, but the guy his superpower is that he fits all over parts of the world.
Yeah,
and he's an enthusiast. He's very focused on design. He has an amazing team of mixed super nerdy engineers, super design creators. My point being is, this is the future of industrialization. Companies that think beyond just how fast can I ship it? How technically does it meet? But rather it's but it's also, how do I do all of that and make people feel, understand, and do things in a way that are innovative? Because the other joy is the packaging for this and the boxing for this is much smaller and lighter than you would expect for, normally you buy a box of a pair of Bose headphones or whatever. It comes in this big box. And that's the whole thing. It's like all these little things.
Add up.
But he and his team do not look like the standard corporate drones that you would expect working at Sony.
Yeah.
And this is why it's being open to that.
To that point, this is a space that is historically, been, for lack of a better word, inhabited by a very particular type of person, which is, and especially when we talk about that in Europe, right?
Yeah, I mean, but in fairness, that's a global challenge.
No, for sure.
Industrial companies. So if you look at, the problem is, almost all these industrialized companies, they are looking to manage risk.
Yeah.
And so often they hire and work with
people that look like them, that went to the same schools as them, that they can identify with.
That's true the world over, be it South America, be it China, be it India, be it Europe. But the advantage that we have in more globalized parts of the world is that we actually have access to that diversity of talent.
Yeah.
And my point being is that diversity, yes, it's race. Yes, it's background. Yes, it's education. Yes, it's income. But it's also the value to the business is the diversity of thought.
I would say that that's arguably, for a business, one of the most important elements is the diversity of thought. You can have a bunch of people who look very different if they've all gone to the same schools, if they've all read the same books, if they've all traveled to the same places. Are you really actually having diversity?
Yeah. I mean, people look at me and they're like, oh, you're diverse. And I'm like, I'm basically a posh English person. I mean, I grew up in Wales, but they'll automatically assume I'm English, but whatever. But you see where I'm coming from. It's like, I have been institutionalized. And so there is a difference. But there are some elements of my background, without doubt, which give me a slightly different. But the reason I'm bringing it on myself is because it's easy to talk about myself, so I'll talk about other fictitious people. But the challenge that I think is really interesting is that, like, how do we get that diversity of experience, and how do we help people understand? Because that's the real value of it, right? The ability to see things that other people can't. As you said, you all go to the same schools. You often end up with similar views. But that's the joy of global hubs, places like Berlin, places like London, places like San Francisco, places like Dubai, Singapore, places which are natural homes for people of multiple backgrounds. Yeah. They come in, they meld, they blend, and that's where the magic happens. And also, the other magic opportunity is, how do you get the people from the areas which just naturally aren't very subject to multiple cultures, etc. How do they thrive? You get them to thrive by enabling them to gain access to those central hubs. I mean, that's the whole thing. It's like, one of the things I find fascinating, you've got all these amazing industrial giants all over the world building these amazing innovation centers. But who are they inviting people from? A 50-mile radius of that innovation center.
Yeah, for sure.
Right? Even like, take Germany, like, the folks in Munich don't invite anybody from outside Munich. The folks in Berlin don't invite anybody from outside Berlin. And I'm just a bit like, oh my good Lord. I will say the best thing about London is Heathrow Airport. Actually, that's not just the best thing, but one of the amazing things is because you have this rapid flow of people, and it's really easy to get to from pretty much anywhere in the world.
Yeah, and it's geographically very central.
Yes, and we can talk about why Berlin and the Berlin airport and why is there still no direct... Anyway.
Yeah, let's not... That is for a different podcast. That is not the one for today.
But from an industrialization point of view, and from that point of things, it's like, it's that ability to get the ideas going faster and the relationships and connections. Yes, we can do everything over the internet. Yes. But we often miss the details. It's like it's actually kind of interesting studied in like the history of science, where people there are plenty of experiments that are documented in scientific literature, but where they've often actually, it is replicable, but they had to send somebody from the original team over because there was some minor nuance or something along the way. And I'm sure that's been seen in anybody who's tried to set up a factory, built something to do stuff. There's a particular process, and even though it's beautifully documented in the patent or literature, etc., to the hilt.
Yeah. There's always that human piece that you need to come in where it's like,
there's actually something there.
You need to like spin it, and it's only in conversation or with an actual physical gesture that you're able to communicate it.
Exactly. And there's just some weird, and this, the whole thing is, it's like, and people underestimate the friction and the cost that brings.
I think that we're moving towards a world where that's going to be even more important and valuable than it has been in the past 20, 50 years.
But then that also comes to the next piece of the industrialization era, which is the only way that's going to be possible is if we get to carbon neutral fuels.
Which we will hopefully have many people in the series that we'll be able to talk about. That is one of the things that I definitely want to focus on with respect to illuminating where we stand in this process.
I mean, like this, for me, it's as an investor, another one of my exciting investments is ET Fuels.
Okay.
And this is just a great example. We were talking about the founder background.
Yeah.
So Lara is amazing.
Okay.
She grew up in Essex.
Okay.
Essex.
Yeah, I was going to say.
Yes. But what was really interesting is she ended up going to Harvard, Goldman Sachs, Harvard Business School. She set up Climate Change Capital, one of the two that helped set it up. She then went to Rio Tinto as one of the as a CFO there. She went to Google, one of the directors there. And she was
she's been institutionalized, as you say.
You think?
Yeah.
But also, she walked out of her 1-point-something million a year job at Google to build a maritime fuel startup that makes carbon neutral fuels.
Okay.
Now, my point being is, all the old oil giants are like,
who is this girl?
Yeah.
Literally girl, not even woman.
That's how they'd refer to her.
Exactly.
Then they'd meet her and they'd be like, no. She's brilliant. She's just like one of the most, you meet her, she immediately helps you understand where she is. She's very humble, but you have to listen to her.
Yeah.
Like she's one, so, but what's been really interesting is that you're right. This element of, if you put her in front of the standard, a standard, oil company, blah, 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 or, etc. It's like on paper, they look at the CV, they look at her and they're like,
this doesn't make sense. 1 + 1 does not equal 2, cannot compute.
But here's the thing. Here's what we found really fascinating. The people who've backed her aren't the hippie, crazy VCs. They're actually people from, a number of them have come from, the money's come from the industrialized world.
Okay.
A number it's come from a wide range of sources. And she's out there, she's building her first plants, etc.
Where's she based?
She is based between London, Portugal, and Texas right now.
Okay.
It's a very global business, right?
Yeah, for sure.
And ultimately, they're building off-grid.
Okay.
And so, but this is what's really, really interesting. Is the funding sources have been plural, because there has been that change where people are like, yeah, you guys, your team has lots of experience. You understand what we're trying to do. You've built a team of people who can actually build and have built, but you look at them and it's not the classic sort of 50 people in suits and ties standing straight with their briefcases going, we are going to build energy factories.
Yeah.
They're just there, very sharp, incredibly bright, incredibly clued up, but also taking all the advantage. Like Lara's superpower is that she understands this market, but she's not of the market.
Sometimes people forget or misunderstand how important it is to have fresh eyes on a topic. It's so important that I think, I mean, there obviously needs to be an industry knowledge, and you have to understand what you're working on deeply, but there's nothing to be said for looking at something with a fresh pair of eyes.
And that's one of the magic things, that like, how do we reinvent this as we're in this era? You know, the industrial era is dead. It died in this country last week.
It did. And now, with that death, let's move on to some quick questions. These are questions that we ask all of our guests about sort of rapid fire. And
coffee to the ready.
Coffee to the ready. So I want you to give me your best answers. I'm curious, like, where you're standing on these. What's one startup trend you're tired of hearing about?
AI is going to destroy everything.
Okay. What's the most overrated industry for investment right now?
AI.
What's a green flag when meeting a founder?
The fact that they look me in the eye and ask, how am I today?
What's one deal you passed on that you regret?
Oh, God, there are too many of them.
Just give us your top 3 then.
Oh, Revolut, because I thought the founder was too arrogant. TransferWise, because I just could not understand why people would need a separate service, because surely the banks will just lower their rates. I was young. What other was... Habito was a really, really interesting business. The idea of digitizing mortgages. I'm not sure where they are right now because they went up. But the element was it needed to be done. And I just like, oh no, people won't change. Mm. And I can't believe I didn't listen to my own advice. People do change. It's what I've always believed in. And I had a moment of, I saw them coming through and it was just like, yeah, and I couldn't understand it. So those are some really good examples of, those are at the $1 billion spectrum.
Okay.
But yeah, there's plenty of others that I've regretted not backing because largely the founders were brilliant and I just didn't have enough money at the time.
If you had to start a business tomorrow, what would it be?
How to improve customer service. Nobody does empathetic customer service. The world needs empathetic customer service.
What's a book every aspiring founder should read?
Not a book, TV show, HBO Silicon Valley Series 1. I force every founder that's been through my accelerator to watch it. I will hold watching parties, and I will even buy them the digital rights if necessary. It is absolutely brilliant because the only way to absorb that sort of very dry information is while being made to laugh.
I also would agree that it is a must-watch for anyone in the space. What's a founder ick? Something that immediately turns you off in a pitch.
Oh yeah, and I'm raising from all these other people, and we know it's all going to be great. And yeah, and I'm just passing by. I realise you're not really likely. It's like, dude, you're FOMOing me because you ain't got nothing else better to do. If you've got a good business, you'll stand on your own 2 feet, and you'll explain to me and not try to FOMO me into stuff. There are plenty of investors who have to FOMO. Generally speaking, if they're former founders, we look at principles.
Yeah.
And that's the danger of the European VCC. Like 80% plus have never really been in a startup. 3 months or 4 months funded by your parents does not count as running a startup unless you've lost your hair, lost your partner, lost something important during being a founder. You have no idea what it's like to be a founder.
What's the first thing you look at in a pitch deck?
The team.
Who's an under the radar founder or company in the industrial space that more people should know about?
Oh, well, Box Stocks, as I've mentioned, I think are doing an amazing, amazing job. But equally, I am very, very excited by a lot of stuff in the biotech industrial side piece. Okay. So Kurt Thomberg is probably one of the most brilliant scientists and founder types. And that's another business I wish I'd actually put money in around genetic editing. But for me, I consider biotech part of the industrial era because bioengineering is engineering. It is a modern day industrial process.
And if you have to bet on one more shift within the industrial landscape in the next 5 years, what would it be?
Customer service, empathy.
Is there anything else you want to share with the audience before we wrap today up?
Not really, other than I think thank you for listening, first of all, and apologies about my bad jokes on my rant. I always have to apologize for that. But I think the key thing is like we are at a really amazing turning point. And please don't be scared of having that conversation with that founder that reaches out to you, trying to sell something, trying to understand. Just say, I'm not going to buy, but I'm very happy to spend 20 minutes on the phone, even if it's in the car or walking. That's what I did on the way here. I just literally took a call while walking here of somebody who was just like, I need to chat.
Yeah.
Have that conversation. Be that person. Your time is super valuable and super precious. And the gift that you give by doing that, take that chance. Do just one of those every month. And we will together be able to change the way, the evolution rate. Just one random 20-minute call a month. If at least half the people on this podcast who listen to this podcast did this, just think about the progress we'd make in just helping people understand whether they should or shouldn't do.
I love us ending with an empathetic note. Saalim, thank you so much for taking the time to sit with us and for sharing your deep knowledge. And looking forward to seeing what's next for you. And again, thanks for joining.
Welcome. Thanks for having me.